There are many different ways to prevent a hostile takeover, but they fall into two main buckets. The first is preventing a hostile takeover bid from ever happening to begin with. And then the second bucket is, once there has been a hostile takeover bid, stopping it from being successful. So I'm going to discuss each of these in turn, but let's start with prevention. So the poison pill is one of the most popular ways and most effective ways to prevent a hostile takeover. Long story short, a poison pill is going to dilute the shares of the potential bidder. So whoever is the company that is wanting to do the hostile takeover, it could be that, okay, the company has something where it says, listen, if any bidder at some point gets more than 30% or more than 40% of the shares of our company, then all of a sudden everybody else who owns a share, they're going to be able to purchase more shares. And so that would dilute the ownership of the hostile bidder. So why does this go under prevention? If you are the bidder and you know there's a poison pill in place, you are not going to go and start trying to get shares because you don't want to activate the poison pill and end up being diluted. It would be incredibly costly for you. Okay? Now, you could also have different amendments to the company's corporate charter to try and prevent a bid from ever happening to begin with. Staggered board is where you have not all the board of director members go up for election in any given year. So let's say that there are 12 members on the board of directors. And you could say, okay, you know what? 4 of them will go up for election this year. Another 4 will go up for election next year. And then the other 4 will go up for election the year after that. So you don't have all 12 members up for election in any given year. How does this prevent a hostile takeover bid? Well, if you are wanting to take over a company in a hostile takeover, one thing you could do is try and get control of the board of directors, so then you could fire management, get rid of the CEO and so forth. But if in any given year there's only 4 people that are going up for election, you could at most get 4 board seats, but you still don't have the other 8. Now you say, well, in a couple years I'll get but in a couple years things could change. Maybe the company's doing better and people aren't as receptive to the takeover. Maybe the shareholders aren't as receptive. Okay, so basically this makes it where somebody would say, you know what, I'm not as likely to make a bid to begin with because I know there's a staggered board. I'm not going to be able to get control of the board this year. Supermajority has to do with, so normally you'd say, okay, well, if we can get 51 or more than 50%, let's say 51% of shareholders to vote for a merger, then the merger would take place, right? The takeover could happen. But a supermajority would say, like, no, we need 70%. Or 80 or 85%, something like that. We're just throwing out numbers here. But you need more than a majority in order for a takeover to be approved. So if you are a hostile bidder and you say, oh, wait, I'm going to need 95%. I don't need just more than half. I need 95% of shareholders to go along with this in order for me to be able to take over that firm, then that might deter you from even trying to take over that firm. Also, when there's multiple classes of stock, so this is sometimes called dual class shares, dual capitalization. So if you have like Class A shares and Class B shares at the company, sometimes you'll see this. There's a company where like the founder of the company wants to make sure that even though they raise money, so they do an IPO and they raise money selling like Class A shares, but then the Class B shares would be like the founder. So you have a founder, so the Class B shares might have like 10 or 20 votes per share, where the Class A shares might be like 1 vote per share. So basically you'd have a founder who maybe owns like 20% of the shares, but they have like 60% of the voting power. So they retain control. And so just basically what this means, if you have this dual class structure, if someone comes along, a hostile bidder, and they say, oh, I got 51% of the shares, but they still might not have 51% of the voting power. So all these things would prevent a hostile bidder from coming in and trying to make a bid to do a hostile takeover. But if there's already been a bid, one thing a company could do to stop this and make the bidder go away is to pay them greenmail. Okay, this was very popular in the 1980s. Hey, greenmail is basically so let's say there's a company that's come along, they're making a hostile takeover bid, and you say, listen, what we're going to do, we're actually going to pay you money to go away. So whatever shares you've acquired thus far, we'll pay you a premium for those shares. Just get out of here. Just sell your position. We'll give you a lot of money for your shares. just go away. So this isn't as popular now because there's a punitive tax on that. It's a really high tax on greenmail, so you don't see that as often. The white knight and white squire, so a white knight defense has to do with if the target company, they say, oh, I don't want to be taken over by this hostile bidder, but maybe I'll go find some other firm that would acquire us on more favorable terms. Okay, maybe they'd offer more money, or you like what their strategy is. You don't think they're going to break up your firm and, sell off the component parts or fire management, something like that. So that's the idea between that type of defense. Capital structure could be that management says we're going to go and repurchase a bunch of our shares. Maybe we're going to take on a lot of debt. So then we're going to somehow change the capital structure to basically make it very difficult, or maybe the hostile bidder changes their mind and says, I don't want any part of this after all. And then with most merger, at some point, some kind of attempted merger, there's usually going to be litigation. So there's going to be a lawsuit, could be filed by the hostile takeover company in some cases, but the target, if they don't want this hostile takeover, they don't want this hostile bidder to take over the firm, they could file a lawsuit and try and tie this up in court for years and basically get out of it that way. Then also, sometimes you hear of something called the Pac-Man Defense. The Pac-Man Defense is an interesting way. It's not as common, but basically what happens is the target company, the one that, so you got the hostile bidder, they're trying to take over the target turns around and says, we're going to try and take over the bidder. Okay, so the hostile bidder came in and made this bid for the target, and the target says, well, you know what, actually, we are going to try and acquire you. Okay, so that's the Pac-Man defense. I'm going to talk about each of these different anti-takeover defenses in more detail in the videos to come.